Hello everyone, this is the second of our Bible studies for New Barn Christian Fellowship in the light of the fact that we can't meet together. So I'm hoping you can all get it on YouTube. And really just to recap, on last week we were looking at Proverbs 31, the noble woman, and what we saw was that the word noble, far from being to do with nobility and high esteem and aristocracy, actually meant valour and strength. And we saw really that it's quite a misleading word to use the word noble. And probably as I was thinking about it, the translators may well have used that word because the woman seemed, because of what she did and her contacts and her husband, perhaps they assumed that she was of a higher class, and so therefore used the word noble. But please don't use that word. It doesn't mean nobility. It means strength and valour. Secondly, the poem about the woman, because that's what it is, it's a poem. The woman isn't real. It's really a picture of how we are to be and how we are to act and how we are to go about our daily business. And we see in the pictures in the passage the way she sets about her work, and she's diligent and industrious and all those sort of things. And what we said was that it's not about the important roles that we have that's important. It's how we go about those roles and how brave we are in those roles. So the whole passage is a description of her attitude and her manner about her way of life, and not about the actual roles herself. So that was another interesting thing. And thirdly, the passage speaks about her as a woman, but we said that the actual passage itself was really addressed to men, and a lot of Jewish men sing this poem to their wives to encourage them. And there is only one directive in this proverb, and that is in verse 31, if you want to look at verse 31. And verse 31, I'm just going to read it. It says, "Give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate." So far from it being a passage that is challenging women to do greater and greater things, it's a passage for men not only to follow those same principles, but to elevate and uplift and encourage the principles of the woman in the passage, to give her the reward that she has earned. So that's the only directive, and it's addressed to men. Now today we are going to look at verse 25 in the passage. If you've got your Bibles and you want to turn to it, or your phones or iPads or something, and this is fast becoming one of those verses like Jeremiah 29, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord." And I've come across more and more people who know this verse. It says, "She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she can laugh at the days to come." And it's the second half of that verse that I wanted to look at, where it says she can laugh at the days to come. Now again, the Hebrew says she laughs, okay, in the Hebrew version, but in the NIV it actually says she can laugh at the days to come. Now that's only one little word, but I think it's significant, because what that's saying in the English is she has the ability to laugh, She can laugh, but she might not. And I think that is sometimes typical of us. We have the ability to laugh, but because of what happens sometimes in our lives, we don't. But the Hebrew is saying that she does laugh. Whatever is coming her way, she laughs. It's much more emphatic in the Hebrew than it is in the English. The English gives you a little bit of a get out by saying that she can laugh. All right, so that's just a little bit there that I think is important in our understanding of what's behind what God is trying to say. And what I believe he's trying to say is that whatever the circumstances, we laugh. Otherwise, if we walk around saying, well, I can laugh, but sometimes I don't, we are allowing circumstances to dictate to us. And I believe we should be dictating to the circumstances. And by that, we have victory and triumph over them. Now, Elna is very good at sending little clips. I'm sure you've received some of her clips over the months. And I wanted to show you this one that she sent to me because this, to me, is an instance of someone whose situation is changing because they can't go out. All the gyms have closed. And so he's found an alternative way of getting the job done, as it were. And you might have seen this, but I'll hold my phone up to the screen so you can see what I mean. Okay, so here we go. He's putting washing up liquid on the floor. And now he's sprinkling some water to mix in with the washing up liquid. Wiping it around with his foot to create a slippery surface. And I must admit, when I saw this, I couldn't help laughing. There we go. Amazing. So, an indication of someone who has circumstances has changed, but he's not moaning about it, but getting on with it and trying to find an alternative. And by that way becomes adaptable to the circumstances around. And this is what's happening in this passage. I want us to look at the word laugh. She laughs at the days to come. And this is the word, okay? It's the word sachach. Okay, you can try and pronounce that, but don't do it with food in your mouth. Sachach. And you'll see on the piece of paper what it means. It means to deride or scorn or to scoff at. All right? Sachach, to deride, to scorn or to scoff at. Hope you can see that one there. It's the same word, if you want to look at a cross-reference, in Psalm 2 and verse 4. Psalm 2 and verse 4. And it says, the one enthroned in heaven laughs. Okay, so this is God. God laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. And what's happening here is that the nations are rising up, if you like, in their pride and in their arrogance. And it says that God looks at the nations and he scoffs and he laughs. Now, it doesn't mean to say he doesn't love the nations, because he died for everyone and he created everyone. So his love is still there. But when someone rises up against God and challenges him in respect of his greatness or his divinity, he can look at that situation, look at that person, look at that nation, and he has the right, doesn't he, to scoff and to laugh, because they are so small and he is so big. And that's the contrast that he is bringing out. He's bringing out his greatness because he wants people to understand that they are so small and he is so big, and hopefully bringing them to a place of humility. And when we look at our situation we're in today, we don't laugh at the fact that people are dying. We don't laugh at the fact that people are suffering. But can we understand that in that situation, we are trying to be caring, we're trying to be loving, we're doing acts of kindness. And even when you look around, even people who wouldn't even believe that Jesus was alive, that they certainly perhaps don't have a relationship with God, there's all sorts of acts of kindness going on all over the world. And it was only on Thursday that we were clapping the NHS. In Manchester, they did a display where there was a certain area that was completely blue because they wanted to honour the NHS. And we are having all sorts of people coming up with new initiatives, like having keep fit sessions at home, which people can tune into on YouTube. There was a chap who was singing outside people's doors because he wanted to cheer them up. So all this is going on, and we are no different. And in a sense, we should be doing those acts of kindness too. But we look at the situation and we look at the way that the enemy tries to exploit man's foolishness, man's mistakes, and he tries to make it worse. And that's what we can scoff at. That's what we can laugh at. That's what we can deride. We can deride him. We can laugh at him. We can scorn him, because all his efforts are subject to God's sovereignty in any case. So if we can understand that, whilst we are sad, whilst we empathise with people in what they're going through, we will not allow ourselves to get dragged down in the situation and lose our peace, because we have a God who contrasts himself against these situations and every efforts of man. And so that faith and that trust that we have is a thread that continues right through what we do and what we say and how we live. Recently, I was watching a film called Defiance, and it's not a recent film that's come out, but it was about a family, and particularly a couple of people. They were Polish, and it was in the World War II in 1941, and they were part of a resistance group against the German occupation. And there was one chap, and they were brothers, and one chap said, well, the only way we can do this is to fight. So let's just fight. Let's build up a band of partisans and resistance fighters and fight. The other chap, he was open to fight, but he also wanted to save Jewish people from the German atrocities. Now, the other chap thought that would slow them down, and they would be old people and children and all that sort of thing, and they'd get nowhere. But this other brother said, no, we are going to fight, but we are going to save Jewish people at the same time. And that's what they began to do. They lived in the forest, and more people began to draw themselves to them. And initially, they saved about 1,200 Jewish people. They saved their lives. And they reckon that from those 1,200 people, some 20,000 people were able to be born and lived and had families. So 1,200 became 20,000. But it was really interesting that during all that time that they lived away in the forest, because they were hiding from the Germans, they still maintained their feasts, they still maintained their prayers, they still maintained their faith in Jehovah, in their God. And I think that was one of the aspects that kept them going, their faith in their God. And that's got to be the aspect that keeps us going, hasn't it? In the days in which we live, our faith in Jesus Christ, holding on to him and not giving up. So the word laugh that we've looked at, that word that we showed earlier on, which is, I'll just show it to you again, is sakach. Okay, sakach. It can also really be translated as the word joy, because when we think of laughter, you can think of, laughing at a joke or whatever, but actually it's a lot deeper than that, and it really is in the realms of joy. Now, you might know the verse, and I'm turning to it now, in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. Hebrews 12 and verse 2. And this is a fantastic way of looking at Jesus' suffering. And we'll be coming to Easter time soon, when we're thinking of Jesus' suffering. And Hebrews 12 and verse 2, it says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." And this is the bit I wanted to highlight. "Who for the joy set before him endured the cross," and what's the next word? Scorning. And that's the word that we've been looking at. Scorning its shame. And Jesus was able to scorn the shame of the cross. He laughed at it in the sense that he was full of the joy of God in his life. So can you see that he experienced the hardship? He went through all the pain for us, but there was a laughter and a joy inside, which meant he could scorn all of that because of the joy that was set before him. And I believe the woman in Proverbs 31 certainly did that. Now, I want to share with you another word which is very, very similar to the word that we had before. Now, you can see that word there, which is sakach, which I've already shown you. This word, you'll see, is very, very similar, and it's the word shachach. Can you see that there is just one H at the beginning, which isn't in the first word? And this means, this actual word shachach, it means to grind to powder. Okay, am I holding that up properly on the screen? To grind to powder. Now, I'll just give you a few seconds just to write those that word and that definition. Shachach, to grind to powder. Now, instantly that we read that, what we are saying is that we can tread, and this is very biblical, we can tread on our enemies. It says that Jesus used the nations as his footstool, okay, because they're so small, and he treads on his enemies. And instead of our circumstances treading on us and overwhelming us, we are meant to, as Christians, to tread upon. And if we are treading and stepping upon something, it means hopefully we're getting higher and we're getting closer to the Lord. Excuse me. And there are many people, and I believe too, who through this situation that we're in now, through this whole coronavirus, it will be a time when people will come to know the Lord because they will be desperate. They will not know what's happening to them. And recently I was reading just a paper cutting of the economy, and it was saying about, oh, there it is, that's the wrong one. It was saying right at the end, and I'll read it, it says, as was the case after the 2008 financial crisis, Britain's financial establishment is attacking the economic and social devastation of COVID-19 head-on. And the last sentence just says, all we can do now is pray that it works. Isn't it lovely that through a terrible situation that we find ourselves in, I believe people have and are and will turn to the Lord. And that's what we would love to happen, isn't it? Okay, so that's something that we need to grasp. And, you know, whatever your future holds, whatever uncertainties you might be experiencing at the moment, and a lot of people are, with their jobs and their finance and all sorts of things, Proverbs 31 surely is telling us that we can hold on to the one who can intervene and bring about something in such a wonderful way that it causes us to laugh at our difficulties and to laugh at our turmoils and stresses. And may that be your experience. And if you're not able to do that, or have not been able to do that, then I believe that through prayer and through encouragement, you can get to that position and situation. So the first part of that verse is to laugh, and the second point is it says a little phrase, days to come. Now, instantly when we read that, we're thinking of the future, are we not? And I just wanted for a few minutes to talk to you about the Hebrew thought of the future and the way the Bible talks about the future. Now, in the Hebrew tenses, in the biblical Hebrew tenses, there is no future tense. There is a past tense and there is a present tense, or an imperfect tense and a present tense. Now, one of the verses you all know, and you can turn into your Bible, but I won't turn to it now, is in Joel chapter 2 and verses 28 particularly. It says, in the last days I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. So in the English, it's giving us this aspect of the future. In the Hebrew, it's in the last days I do pour out my spirit on all flesh. So there's a question of time, and there's a question of event. Our tenses are more concerned with time. The Jewish tenses are more concerned with the event, not the time. So the important thing in the Jewish mind isn't the timing of something, it's just the event itself. And so I just want to unpack that for a little bit, and it might help us if we look at a few other verses by way of cross-reference to help us to understand what the Bible's saying. So we'll just quickly turn to Joshua chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1. And in verse 2, it says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them. Okay, so the implication there is that the land is about to be given. So it's future tense. All right, that's in the NIV. In the Hebrew, it doesn't say I'm about to give them. It says, the land I am giving them. So the future event, if you like, is a present reality. So they haven't actually gone into the land yet. So they will go into the land as a future event. But can you see that God is saying that it's a present reality? It's as if it's already happened. All right, that's the first little verse. And in verse 3, in the NIV, in the English, it says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Okay, so I will give you, future, every place where you set your foot. So the Hebrew says, wherever you shall tread, I have given it to you. It's the same sentiment as in verse 2. It's a future event because they haven't crossed over yet. But can you see that God has given it to them, past tense, already? So whereas verse 2 spoke about a future event, and I am giving, so the future becomes a present reality. In verse 3, the future has become a past gift already that God has given. Okay, so I don't know whether you can understand that. I'm trying to explain as well as I can. So the future in our English is something that's yet to be, but in the spiritual realm, it's something that has already been given to us by the Lord. And what that means is that we can see our future in the light of our past. Okay, now that's really important because we hear things like, do not allow your past to affect your future. I'm sure you've heard that. The things we've experienced in the past shouldn't affect who we are to become, shouldn't define who we are. And most biblical truth is either this or it's that. It's normally both things. It's normally two things. It's not always the extreme of one side or the extreme of the other. It's very often a bit of both sides. And there's lots of, someone said years ago, all truth is parallel. In other words, it's got two sides to it, going alongside each other. And what people have held on to over the years is that verse in Isaiah 43, verse 18, which we will turn to, Isaiah 43 and verse 18. And this is so often quoted, but I'm not sure that people fully understand what they're saying when they say it. Isaiah 43 verse 18 says, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past, see I am doing a new thing. Now that's absolutely true, because God doesn't want us to dwell on the past. All right, we can think about the past, we will remember the past, but we're not living in the past. So that's absolutely right. And when God is doing a new thing, the new things are what we need to move into in our lives, what God is doing. So Isaiah 43 verse 18 is correct. And it's saying, do not let the past rule over you. Don't let it become a stumbling block. Don't let it be a ball and chain around your feet. That's Isaiah 43:18. But in Isaiah 46 and verse 9, okay, it says, remember the former things, those of long ago. Now, there would be some people who'd look at that and say, well, there you go, that the Bible's contradicting itself. Well, the Bible never contradicts itself, and you have to weigh up the Isaiah 43 passage or the Isaiah 46 passage, because it's talking about two different things. Isaiah 43 is don't allow the past to dominate your present. Don't be a slave to the past. Okay, so that's the meaning of that. But Isaiah 46 says, remember the former things. Because it goes on to say, I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, etc., etc. So in other words, remember the former things. Remember who God is. Remember what God has done. So can you see that that is different to the Isaiah 43 passage? And so it's not about not remembering the past. It is about remembering the past. And what we're trying to say is we remember the past because we're remembering God's faithfulness. We're remembering what God has done. We're remembering all the blessings that he has poured into our lap, shaken, pressed down, and running over, as we read. The whole book of Deuteronomy is about reminding the people before they go into the promised land, reminding the people what God has done and how good he has been, because it's in that remembrance that will stand them in good stead for their future and for what comes up ahead. And there are far more references in the Bible, well over 250 references to remember than there are to forget. So when you think in terms of, well, I've had a really, really bad past, you know, I've been abused and I've been this and I've been that and all that sort of thing. God's not saying try and forget that, because actually we don't. And it's very difficult to just choose to not remember. But what he is saying is that in those times of that abuse, or in those times when we went through really difficult situations, God was there. Whether we realize it or not, whether we felt him or not, whether we knew him or not, God was there. And so as we remember those difficult things in our past, we're remembering not the pain, and the pain may still be there. That's not the issue. We're remembering the fact that God saw us through that pain. And we're not belittling the pain, we're not belittling the turmoils and troubles that we went through. But what we are saying is that in spite of all those, God was seeing us through all those things. And that's what this passage is saying about this woman. She's remembering, and she can laugh at the days to come, because the days to come, the future events that are coming, which she doesn't know what they are going to be, she's not actually bothered about what they're going to be, because that doesn't make any difference. She's going to laugh at them anyway. She's going to scorn at them anyway. The bad situations, of course, because God is on the throne and he doesn't change. And it actually doesn't matter what your future throws at you, because your future is affected by your past, and your past is bound up in your testimony of how good God has been for you and with you and through you. And there's so much in our past that inspires us and encourages us, because we can say, God has been my rock, God has been faithful. I came across some things recently about wayside chapels. Now, I think I knew that they existed, but I'd never really given them much thought until recently when I came across them. And these are little chapels which were built on the side of a road, usually. And they were for pilgrims on their journeys. And as the pilgrim went on their journey, they came across a wayside chapel, and they went inside, and they were only big enough for about half a dozen people, for about 6 to 10 people. And they would pause on their journey, and they would pray. Now, some of them obviously would worship a figurine of Christ or Mary, and we are not into that. Obviously, we are not into that. But the principle was to come aside from the journey and spend some time in prayer. And I just thought, wow, that's lovely to have done that. And then that led me on to some of my own pilgrimages and some of my own walks and situations that I've been involved with. And I remember in the year 2000, just before we started the Darrant Valley Community Church in 2001, and some of you may recall it. In fact, some of you might have even been on the walk. But we did a midnight walk. We started about 10 o'clock at South Darrant, and we walked through the night. That was the aim. We walked along the Darrant Valley path by the river, and we ended up at this white cross at Shoreham. If you know where that is, it's on the hillside. A big white cross, and there were, I think, about a dozen of us, and we'd walked through the night. And if I'm right, I think we arrived at the cross on Good Friday morning. And at 4 o'clock, there we were. We'd arrived at the cross. We'd been walking for about 6 hours with a few breaks in between. And there was a lady with us who had a violin. And at that hour of the morning, by the cross, on Good Friday, we were able to sing a few songs and listen to that lovely violin. And that was part of something that I look back on. It's part of my history, part of my past. But can you see that inspires you to go on for your future and to face whatever's coming your way? So it was just a lovely time. And so I was blessed by that as I looked in the past, all these pilgrims over many centuries, really. Some of the wayside chapels are quite modern, but a number of them are very old too. So I looked at that, and it inspired me as I looked back. And really, just to conclude, there is another word that I wanted to show you. That's our third and last word for today. And it's the Hebrew word etmol. Etmol. Now, it means yesterday. Okay? It means something in the past. Yesterday. But it also means, and the more you understand the Hebrew language, the more you can see that the meanings of a particular Hebrew word, oh sorry, I'll hold it up a bit more for you. It means to face something. There we are, to face something. All right. So it means yesterday, but it means to face something. And when we think of facing something, we might think of something that is coming up. You know, when you sit on a train, I don't know when you go on a train where you sit. And I think most people, and probably me included, you like to sit in the seat that's facing where you're going. There are some people who sit in the seat and your back is where you're going and you're facing where you've just been. Do you see what I mean? You're facing behind, as it were. Now, whether you're facing frontwards or whether you're facing backwards, the point is we are to face it. I mean, we can't help facing if we're going forward, but there are some things that we're going to have to face in the future that might be really difficult. And there are certainly things that have happened in our past that have been difficult. But can you see that when we're rooted in God, it doesn't matter if it's something difficult to come or if it's something difficult that has been, we are to face it. And there's a lovely verse in Luke which says that Jesus, when he was going to Jerusalem, he set his face like flint. So he was determined, there was a resolve to go through this experience that he was just about to go through for you and for me. So there we are. I think I'll leave that there. I think you've had enough. 41 minutes now. So the Lord bless you as you meditate on this woman in Proverbs 31. And next Sunday, what's on my heart really, particularly in the context of where we are in our society and where we are worldwide, we'll be looking at a particular place. And just think of the places in the Bible, and if anyone can second guess me and can let me know what you think the place we're going to be looking at next week, then I'll perhaps give you a little reward. All right, the Lord bless you and see you soon.